Welcome to Movie Talk, our weekly show about movies, the people who create them, and the people who star in them. Stephen Daldry's career has spanned the stage. He is the man who created the musical Billy Elliot, as well as the film, to such memorable films as The Hours, The Reader, and Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. The last time I saw you was a moment of tension where I think you had seen the first print of Extremely Loud, and you looked a little uneasy about it.
I was a little uneasy. I hadn't even seen the print myself, and it was the first audience we'd shown it to where you were there, and I wasn't sure how it would look or how it would go down, in fact.
Well, it looked splendid and went down great. I mean, I have rarely heard such applause, so it was a very felicitous screening.
I was very happy that it went so well, yeah.
Listen to me, I'm gonna be home in about 20 minutes.
No, you listen to me. We broke a window to let in some air. Now I'm gonna be okay.
The building and there was smoke everywhere. They're trying to save us.
Where are you?
I'm on the 106th floor.
An American Airlines plane was hijacked.
Thomas, you listen to me, and you come home.
I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna try to call you again in a few minutes.
Please just stay talking to me.
You don't like simple projects, whether it's a movie or a play. What is it about your taste in subjects that leads you to dangerous zones?
I never think I'm going into dangerous zones, to be honest. A point of example is Extremely Loud. And I knew making a film about 9/11, or at least the consequences of 9/11, was people are going to have strong views on, but the film, as it proves, has become controversial, which is, I'm interested in. I'm interested in the conversation. I'm interested in why people get distressed by it, why people get angry about it, and why people want to have a conversation about it.
So my experience has been the audiences themselves accept the picture for what it is, but the critics are dwelling a lot about how provocative it is to deal with 9/11. Do you find that?
Certainly, a lot of the critics have found a whole lot of issues about how to tell stories about 9/11, yeah. Mm-hmm. But again, I mean, I've shown the film now, since we last showed it with you, sort of all over North America, and audiences have a very different sort of response to it.
3 o'clock, okay? We'll go everything.
Who's that?
My husband. You must think this is very odd.
Oh, I think a lot of things are odd. People tell me I'm very odd all the time. I got tested once to see if I had Asperger's disease.
This kid is absolutely brilliant and Extremely Loud. But that's tough to direct kids. You're a man of great patience.
Yeah, that is certainly true. But in this particular case, it wasn't about patience. Thomas Horne, I think, gives one of the greatest screen performances by a young actor in the history of cinema. I think it's genuinely astonishing. I think we were blessed to have him and find him. But I think that he access his emotions in a way that is truly phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Well, I read somewhere in an interview with him that he explained that he would listen to your input and then he'd go and think for half an hour and figure, well, what would my character do? I thought it's an interesting discipline for someone who wasn't an actor.
He was incredibly disciplined, and the key things you have to do with it, with any actor, particularly it's true of the young actor, is create a methodology where you can have a conversation and understand exactly what both of you are up to and be truthful with each other. Mm-hmm. And we went through a methodology with Thomas that he grasped with great enthusiasm, and then he embarked on this journey with incredible courage, I thought. And the rest of the adult cast, of course a fantastic adult cast, were very supportive of that particular process.
Ms. Bullock and Mr. Hanks, that's a pretty good cast.
Joined by the amazing Max von Sydow and the great Viola Davis, who's having an incredible year.
I'm trying to find a lock for this key that was in the envelope that once belonged to my father.
I'm sorry, I don't know anything about the key or your father.
Can I take your picture so I can remember you?
Working with children, it seems to me to go through a lot of takes would be a difficult discipline. I mean, they'd lose it, it seems to me.
No, yes and no. Again, in Thomas's context, he understood the idea of repeated action. So we really taught him what it is to find the moment, repeat the moment, and actually refine that moment. And Thomas was incredibly disciplined about this.
How come you don't speak? Are your vocal cords damaged or something? Or did something scare you to death? Cool. When was the last time you spoke? Do you ever try to talk? Why don't you try to say something to me? Go on. My name is the Renter.
Now, at any point, did you feel that Max von Sydow should talk?
Do you know, what a good question. And it was a debate. It's so funny you should say that. It was a debate about whether at the end of the film he might say something. But in the end, Max was very clear that he thought he shouldn't. And had a very long conversation with Eric Roth, and we decided in the end Max was right and he should not speak.
Plenty of boys do ballet, you know.
Do they, Nick? What boys do ballet?
Nobody round here, but plenty of men do.
Puffs?
Not necessarily puffs.
Who like?
What about that Wayne Sleep? He's not a puff.
Huh?
He's as fit as an athlete.
Ah, bet he couldn't beat Daley Thompson.
Maybe he's not in a race, but in stamina. Why don't you come tomorrow? You can just watch.
I can't. Gotta go to boxing, haven't I?
Please
Now, directing children, you did it again in Billy Elliot. Were there many takes? You always wonder with someone of that age and inexperience, is it like take 12 or 15 that we're seeing, or is that him?
We rehearse. But I come from the theatre, don't forget, so...
Indeed.
You're not making it up on the day. There's no trickery here. There's no, trying to fool the child, nor is there, trying to capture little moments that may or may not be strung together in the edit room.
Yeah.
I used to go to ballet.
See?
Aye, for your nana. For girls, not for lads, Billy. Lads do football or boxing or wrestling. Not friggin' ballet.
But I seem to always run into you at moments of tension. There was the opening of Billy Elliot, and I remember you introduced me to the cast and the backup cast.
That's exactly right.
And the backup to the backup cast. And that was an extraordinary evening. Well, I remember you said to me, okay, we made it in London, despite these arcane references to political figures no one can remember. But Broadway will never accept it. But in point of fact, you didn't change it much for Broadway.
We did not even the language. And funnily enough, there's all this press at the moment because Meryl Streep's just come out with The Iron Lady and this movie about Maggie Thatcher. So suddenly people are beginning to understand who this British Prime Minister was again.
Once again, I don't think you felt that this was a sure thing, that Billy Elliot was a home run.
No, neither the film, we never expected the film to do particularly well. And when it did, it was a complete surprise. No, exactly the same was true of the stage show.
Yeah.
Both in London, and then the idea that it would run on Broadway, that it would become a Broadway hit, we just had no idea of.
It's just up here. I'll be fine now. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Look after yourself.
The Reader was, I thought, a fascinating movie that was a bit underrated to me. I thought that the public didn't quite get it. I don't know if you were disappointed in the reception to The Reader.
No, quite the reverse, funnily enough, Peter. I always thought that the film would be more successful in Europe, and it was profoundly successful within Europe. And,
yes, in Europe it was.
So
I just felt in the U.S. it didn't quite.
Oh, I see.
It wasn't as understood as it could have been.
Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. But the joy for me was I was making a movie about Germany, and it was a country that I'd been spending a lot of time in since I was a schoolboy. So for me, it was a total pleasure to be in Germany for 2 years making the movie and then taking the movie back to Germany once I finished it.
And the German public did accept it, though, right?
Yeah, no, we were was very happy with how it went down in Germany.
What's your name?
What?
Your name.
Why do you want to know?
I've been here 3 times. I want to know your name. What's wrong with that?
Nothing, kid. There's nothing wrong with that. It's Hannah.
You looked so suspicious.
What's yours, kid?
Michael.
Michael? So I'm with a Michael.
I remember one of the times I ran into you, you were having a great argument with Harvey Weinstein.
There is nothing more pleasurable than having arguments with Harvey Weinstein.
I do it all the time.
And I mean that in the best way.
Yeah, but one does have to yell at him. But there was a great deal of let's say, spirits. I mean, so it was late in the evening, and he had had a few, and you had had a few, and you guys were going at it. I loved it.
Were we really?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love Harvey. And I'm sure we do go at it, and I never remember.
The search for the 6th borough was the greatest expedition ever.
All right, I've got amateur entomologist, francophile, amateur archaeologist, computer consultant.
Why amateur everything?
It's a compliment.
Amateur pacifist?
We are at a festival. Do you find that it's important for a filmmaker to proselytize? Once you've finished a movie, you're not really finished yet. You have appearances to make.
Do you know, I feel a responsibility, particularly in this case, although I felt it last time on the reader to Harvey, to support the people that gave you the money.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, it's Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers have been exceptional, I would say, exceptionally supportive of a filmmaker. And so I'm happy to do anything they ask me to try to get the film out to an audience and to get the film seen by as many people as possible.
But once again, it is not the easiest subject to construct in terms of marketing. Extremely loud. I mean, to explain it to the public that this really is a riveting drama, it isn't just about 9/11, that takes a certain skill.
I don't know why you go to the movies, Peter. I don't know why people go to the movies. I don't know why really people go to the theatre. The only thing I know why people really go to any entertainment, I mean, they go for a number of reasons. They go to laugh, and they go to have a profound emotional experience. I'm hoping that this film can give people an emotional experience that is cathartic and profoundly moving. And I think that if you can do that, I think that the film is about loss. It's about catastrophic loss. But loss is the one thing we all share. Everybody in their life has loss. This is not a movie that's out of anybody's experience. Of course, it's out of the experience of not everybody had catastrophic loss like the characters in this film in 9/11. But everybody's had loss. It's part of the human condition. And so the idea of sharing loss and sharing loss with a family that went through that extraordinary experience on 9/11, then I think that can only be a collective experience that is a powerful thing for us all to share.
Excuse me. Can you tell Billy Elliot that his family is here?
So I must ask you a last question. When I did see Billy Elliot 3 times in different places, now, did you ever go to it as its director and see the cast absolutely mess up and say to yourself, how did this happen?
Do you know, I never did.
Really?
I never did. And it's a good question, but do you know, and I literally 3 nights ago, I went to the show right now is at the Kennedy Center in Washington. And I went to the Kennedy Center without telling the cast I was going. And I was on my way here, and I thought I'd just nip in and have a little sit at the back and not tell them I was in, and just to see how it is. And I hadn't seen it for a while on that particular tour. And it was fantastic. And the audience was having a ball, and I thought, how great that I can actually turn up out of nowhere, without anyone knowing, watch my show and come out of it saying, wow, that was a great evening.
That is really gratifying. Did you go afterwards backstage?
Of course, and told them, and they were outraged and delighted, but outraged that I hadn't told them.
You snuck up on them.
I snuck up on them.
Yeah. But I remember, again, that opening week in London when you had the kids lined up in the alley behind the theatre.
Exactly.
And they were wonderful kids, and all of them looked like they were dying to get on.
I am so happy you remember that, Peter. That's a real joy you do. It was one of the great nights of my life, and I was very happy you're there to share it with me.
Well, I appreciate you sharing it with us. My wife and I were absolutely thrilled because these were such vivid, the cast, the backup cast. They were terrific kids. And they all got their moment.
They all got their moment.
Yeah.
And how great, Peter. I've had so many great moments with you in my professional life, and it's great to be here and talking to you again.
Well, it's a delight to talk to you. Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Peter.
The job of the film critic sounds like total unabated fun. But in point of fact, film criticism is very demanding of patience, skill, and forbearance. Todd McCarthy is a master at all of the above. Todd, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Peter.
Now, here's the thing about the critic's job. People say critics don't count anymore. Do you agree with that thesis?
Well, there's certainly two ways to look at it. To grant that, the semi-truth of that now, it used to be that there were a few critics and they were all important, you know, famous few critics in New York, and then every small town even had a critic. So you knew who the critics were, and they had a voice, and they became kind of mini celebrities in their own right for many, many years. And now, living up to the newspaper editor's view that anybody can be a film critic, even a sports writer, just bring them over and anyone has a right to their opinion. Everyone is because of the internet. So anyone who has an opinion about movies with the democratic means of news dissemination now, anybody is a critic. So you could legitimately say that film critics, professional film critics' stature and standing has been diminished somewhat. However, Roger Ebert, who's been around as long as any critic now, feels that film criticism is in a great period now because there are so many voices and because there's so much instantaneous exchange. It's not just that you lay down your opinion and it can't be argued with and discussed. In fact, more people are, in a way, discussing films and discussing views and criticism about films than ever before. So it's a very different thing. I would say the egos of individual professional critics might have been dented a little bit over the last few years. Number one, because they're being laid off at record numbers. Number two, because their stature is diminished. It's a more spread out field. But it doesn't mean that the value of critical opinion is anything diminished from what it used to be.
True, but in the 70s, Pauline Kael, who was a renowned critic for The New Yorker and other publications, she would sweep into the room with her entourage. And boy, she would scare the hell out of people.
That's right.
When Pauline was there, you knew you were going to live or die. And I always admired the way some filmmakers like Robert Altman knew how to play some of the famous critics very shrewdly.
But there were only a few of them, so you knew who you could deal with. If you had relationships or somehow interacted with 5 or 6 critics, you sort of had the important ones covered. But nowadays, as I say, there's so many, and there's nothing that gives any particular extra weight to one over another. So if you just go online and troll around for 30 minutes or so, you could read 20 or 30 different people and see what the range of experience is. And there's this whole notion now of kind of amalgamated critical sites where you can just look on there on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and so on and see 50 opinions, and you can decide for yourself.
And I find that annoying because I don't want to know what the cacophony of voices has to say. I'd like to know what 2 or 3 or 4 people, you being one of them, who I respect, what you guys think about it.
Well, I do like to think that there's still a value in, number one, being a professional in the sense that no one's going to hire, no paper, no venue of any kind is going to hire someone to review classical music, art, serious literature, music, you know, opera or symphony music, if they're not somehow well-versed in those fields. But that's never entirely applied to film criticism. Somehow that's always been the exception. You accept scholarly opinions about those arts, but not about movies. And I like to think there's a value in the people who really do know the history of movies and who've seen most of the important films to be able to talk about them in a certain way.
I would agree, except for this, that really they're 2 totally different streams of film. There is the art films or the specialty films, and the tentpole films, the studio films that cost $200 million and are based on comic strips or whatever. And it seems to me it's an entirely different discipline. Like when you go in to a tentpole picture, knowing its origins and knowing what its aims are, do you exercise a whole different group of criteria?
Well, yes, you accept the film for its purpose in life, and its purpose in life is to be a massive crowd pleaser. However, you now have more and more sort of interesting filmmakers sometimes setting their feet into that territory. I mean, anytime Christopher Nolan makes a film, you have to take it rather seriously or look at it from an artistic point of view. Some people kind of get into that from time to time, and even more routine directors some do a better job than others. But But again, even in the 70s, if those films had existed then, people wouldn't be rushing to see what Pauline Kael said about Spider-Man 3 or, you know, Sherlock Holmes 2. I mean, that's not the function of critics like that, to discuss films like that, really, because, and then let's face it, fanboys have taken over a whole little section of film criticism, and maybe for those kind of films, those people are more important than the New Yorker and the New York Times.
But do you ever say to yourself, when you're seeing a picture of that sort, do you ever say, what the hell am I doing here? I mean, this picture is aimed at 12-year-olds at best. Why am I taking my time to see it?
Well, but there were always films like that.
That's true.
So, you know, all the you know, the smoky films back in the 70s, and those weren't even terrible compared to some films, but there are some films that are critic-proof, and frankly, where criticism is useless, and believe you know when that's true, when you go in to see films like that. So you just sort of do it for the record.
You do, but you're a very polite person. Do you ever walk out?
Well, not if I'm reviewing. No, but if I'm at a film festival and I'm not reviewing that film and it's a waste of time, I'll run off to the next one. But even from my film festival selection point of view, I know that, you know, this film is not in the running, so I'm going to go check something else out. There's just life is too short, a film festival is too compressed to spend 3 hours at a Portuguese, you know, drug-addled marathon, you know, when you have some other films to see.
There are some film critics who I admire because of their ability to sleep sitting up straight, and no one, unless you look into their eyes, would know that they are not with us. Now, have you ever mastered that talent?
Oh, I wouldn't want to say, but people have asked me once or twice if I ever fell asleep in movies, and I say only when they deserve it.
Right. Good to talk to you again, Todd.
Great to see you, Peter.